I never imagined that words alone could break someone so completely. I knew they could hurt, but I didn't think they had the power to make someone pack up their entire life and disappear without a trace. I'm Linda, 28 years old, and maybe I should start from the beginning before everyone rushes to judge me for what happened between me and my husband, Jack. Jack and I got married quite young. Looking back now, it was probably too soon. I had just graduated from college at 24, while he was 27, already working as an engineer with a steady job and his own apartment. While my friends were still chasing after guys who had no clue what they wanted in life, Jack stood out. He was calm, grounded, and had a clear vision for the future. He made me feel safe. Those early years of marriage were truly beautiful. We managed to buy a cozy little house in the suburbs, and everything felt like it was falling into place. On paper, life looked perfect. Lately, Jack has been growing distant, like I'm living with a robot. He comes home from work, heads straight into his office, and glues himself to the computer screen. He barely acknowledges me unless I'm standing directly in front of him, waving my arms. Last month, I got promoted to senior manager, a huge milestone in my career. I was beyond excited, and I couldn't wait to share the news over dinner, but Jack's reaction? Just a flat, "That's great," without even looking up from his phone. While I was hoping for a hug, a toast, or at least some genuine excitement from the man I love, all I got was cold indifference, as if my joy didn't matter to him at all. I never asked for grand gestures. All I wanted was for Jack to be present. To really listen. Last week, I planned a romantic date night, hoping to reconnect somehow. I made a reservation at a well-known restaurant, picked out my best dress, spent hours getting ready. I was so hopeful. Then, just an hour before we were supposed to leave, Jack texted he had to work late. So I sat there alone, fully dressed up, with a heart that slowly sank into disappointment. I felt ridiculous. When he got home around 10 p.m., I couldn't hold it in any longer. Every emotion I had buried exploded. I screamed. I said things I shouldn't have said, and then I crossed a line. "You're just like your father, worthless man." I knew how much that would hurt. Jack had opened up to me early in our relationship, telling me how his dad abandoned him as a child. But in that moment, all I wanted was for him to hurt the way I was hurting. But he didn't yell, didn't argue. He just looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, distant. Then he turned and walked silently into his office. I thought maybe he just needed some time to cool off, but the next morning, his car was gone. I assumed he left for work early or just needed space. But then 5 days passed, no calls, no texts. His phone went straight to voicemail. I messaged, but got no reply. His sister, Mia, finally texted me back with just one line, "He's safe," and nothing more. I tried everything: calls, texts, emails, even his work email. Nothing. Then one day, I checked the shared email account Jack and I used for paying bills. A subject line froze me in place. Employee resignation notice, Jack. It was an official email from his boss, sent to the whole company. Jack had quit, effective immediately. Panicked, I called his manager. She sighed, voice soft and almost pitying. Jack had been working non-stop these past few months. Overtime, late nights, he was planning a special trip for your anniversary. He just wanted to reconnect with you. I couldn't breathe. While I had been accusing him of being distant, he had been pouring everything he had into giving us a second chance. But the worst part came from me and his sister when she finally told me the full story. That night, I screamed at him. Jack had actually rescheduled our dinner reservation for later, knowing I might be running late due to the new promotion. He had even arranged for flowers to be delivered to my office just to surprise me. But a last-minute emergency at work forced him to stay behind and fix it so that our anniversary trip wouldn't be ruined. And yet, in return, I threw his deepest wound back in his face. I insulted the father who abandoned him on the very night he was trying to show me how much he cared. Mia told me something I'll never forget. Jack's father left him on his 12th birthday. He promised to take him out for dinner, but he never came back. And me, the one Jack trusted the most. I told him he was just like the man who shattered his world. What was I thinking? I only just found out that Jack had been going to therapy for years trying to heal the scars left by abandonment, trying to cope with fears he never spoke out loud. All I ever saw was the distance, the silence. But I didn't realize that was how he was surviving. That was how he was trying to protect the fragile hope he had for love. I thought he didn't care, but in reality, he was skipping lunch, sitting at his desk watching videos of romantic getaways trying to plan a meaningful anniversary trip for us. Finally, his best friend James told me where Jack had been staying at his place. But then he added something that broke me completely. Linda, Jack doesn't know if he can come back. He feels like whatever trust he had left just got crushed. James told me to give Jack space, that he's not okay right now, and me showing up would only make things worse. But how am I supposed to sit still and watch my marriage fall apart? I keep replaying that night in my head over and over. If only I had waited 10 more minutes to let him speak. If only I hadn't let my emotions spiral out of control. If only I hadn't said those awful words. The truth is, I never believed Jack was like his father. Not even for a second. He's nothing like him. Jack is thoughtful, responsible, and more compassionate than anyone I've ever known. But that night, I was hurting. And I wanted him to hurt too. Now I finally see it. I wasn't just cruel, I shattered the trust he had spent years trying to rebuild. And worst of all, I don't know if I'll ever get the chance to make it right. The empty house and the cruel truth. This house feels too big now, too quiet. I wander from room to room, haunted by silence until I find things that tear me apart even more. Sticky notes full of travel ideas, crumpled jewelry receipts in the office trash. Jack had been planning everything, and I was too wrapped up in my own pain to notice. Desperation. Last night, I drove to James' place. Jack's car was there. I saw him through the window, just sitting on the couch, staring blankly into space. I wanted to run to him, to explain, to beg for one more chance, but I just sat in my car and cried. Because I finally understood I had done the one thing his father did to him, betrayed his deepest trust. The final blow, today, I received the divorce papers. After 3 weeks of silence, this was how Jack said it was over. The envelope was on the kitchen table. He must have come by while I was at work. I read the words, irreconcilable differences. That was it? His lawyer left a note. They'd collect his things while I was away so we wouldn't have to meet. Jack doesn't even want to share the same space with me anymore. The wake-up call. I called my mom and told her everything. She asked only one thing. Linda, when was the last time you asked Jack if he was okay? I couldn't answer because I honestly didn't know. I had been too busy talking about my own struggles. Meanwhile, Jack carried everything silently, lovingly. I found the gift he had hidden: plane tickets to Hawaii, resort reservations, a handwritten itinerary with sunrise walks, couple massages, dinners under the stars. He even wrote conversation starters, how to ask me about my dreams, our future, starting a family, his progress in therapy. No going back. I wrote Jack a long, heartfelt letter. I took it to James' house. He looked at me and said quietly, "Jack's not here anymore. He's moved to Seattle. New job, new beginning, and me." I was left standing in the wreckage I created. Friends, co-workers, neighbors. They all told me what Jack used to do for me: fill my gas tank, pre-order books I loved, quietly take care of me when I didn't even notice. While packing up his office, I found his therapy journal. I know I shouldn't have read it, but I did. The last entry, written the night everything fell apart. "I'm afraid I'm becoming my father. I've tried not to be him. I've tried to be present, to love fully, but maybe that was never enough. It was enough, more than enough. But I wasn't enough to recognize it. A new life, without me. Today was supposed to be our first day in Hawaii. Instead, I sit in this empty house, holding old wedding photos. Mia sent me a picture, Jack, smiling again, standing in front of a new home. That smile, it used to be mine, now it belongs to someone else. She's a preschool teacher, kind, gentle. The kind of woman who will never weaponize his past. I wish I could say I've changed, that I've grown, but the truth is, I'm only just starting to realize the damage I caused by orbiting solely around my own pain. When I'm sorry isn't enough, I started therapy. Not to win Jack back, I know that chapter is closed, but to understand why I did what I did. Dr. Anna asked me a question that kept me up all night. Why do you think you have the right to use someone's deepest wound as a weapon against them? I still don't have an answer. But I'm starting to see it now. I made everything about me. I called it communication, but it was really just a monologue. I blamed Jack for not meeting my needs, all while ignoring what he may have needed from me. The kindest goodbye. Last week, I got a package from Jack. Inside were all of our wedding photos, carefully wrapped in tissue and bubble wrap. Not tossed, not damaged, just returned with care. No harsh words, no accusations. Just a small note in his familiar handwriting. You should keep these. Thank you for the beautiful memories. That's Jack. Even in goodbye, he remains kind. A quiet encounter, and a deeper truth. I ran into his mother at the grocery store. I opened my mouth to apologize. She just looked at me and said, when Jack was little, after his father left, he used to set an extra bowl on the dinner table, just in case his dad came back. It took years before he believed someone might love him and stay. Then she walked away. No anger, no blame, just silence. And I stood there, shaking, in the freezer aisle, realizing something I can never unsee. How do you forgive yourself when you became the very fear that haunted the person you love most? Thank you for listening until the end. Every story holds a piece of someone's truth, and maybe a piece of your own. If this touched you in any way, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. See you in the next video.